Hello. Let me know if y'all can hear me. Okay, fixing my view. Should be okay now. Okay, cool. All right, so today we are going to start with Express. Now, Express is a amazing framework to work with alongside with Node.js in order to give us the ability to write really nice APIs, web APIs. Just makes our job a lot easier. So for those of you guys, hopefully you guys worked on the assignment this weekend. Okay, hopefully you guys worked on that. If you guys have any questions on it, please let me know. I will probably do a session on it maybe on Friday. I just want to get through the important stuff today, which is Express. So what I want to make a note of right here is that we currently have around 166 lines of code, which, it's not too bad. There's a lot of comments here that I wrote, but needless to say that it's quite a bit. We have our little fake database, it takes up maybe 30 lines or something like that. Okay. But one of the problems, one of the situations you're going to run into is if you write your web API like this, is that it becomes quite cumbersome to move things around. Now, you could write separate functions and pass the request and response based off of cases like based off the path, and then also maybe also based off of the method. That is totally legit, writing separate functions for everything, and then figuring out some kind of mechanism in order to route the requests and response objects based off the paths, the query parameters, and also the HTTP verbs. Okay, that is totally possible. You can totally build out that entire solution yourself. Or you can use Express. Express is basically doing that already for you. Much nicer, probably anything better that I could come up with on my own, right? And it's worked on by the community, and they have a set of contributors and they do a fantastic job. So what I want to do is I'm going to rename this file app.js. I'm going to rename it to old.js. And then what I want to do is I want to compare and contrast the old code to the new code. Okay? That way we can see why it would make sense to use something like Express, and why there's a lot of companies that are using Express. Okay? It's a beautiful thing. Okay, and then just to reiterate, okay, Express is downloaded based off the npm module here. People probably use Yarn. I'm not sure if these numbers would also affect a Yarn, but I would assume probably not. We have about 13.7 million weekly downloads, right, on average here. That is pretty nuts. Okay, that's pretty nuts. If we click here on the Express repository, we have 53,000, almost 54,000 stars. So this is a really highly rated framework for Node.js, and there's about 262 contributors. And it shows here that it's used by 10.2 million people, like at least as far as developers are concerned. I'm not sure how much you can rely on those numbers, like if it's per project or just per person. that uses Express, but that's still no small feat. That's amazing. So this is used quite heavily. Okay. All right. Now, with anything in life, understanding tools is good and like learning how to use them, but do not depend on them. Understand what Express is doing for you, and then, you know, use that to your advantage. Now, the reason why I went through, kind of like the long route, as you would say, the long way to create a server, right? This is totally valid. This totally works, and you could, totally expand on this. The problem is that we're repeating ourselves too much. Flexibility is a problem, and also extensibility. It's quite problematic in this route if we do it this way. And so that's why we have something like Express. So I'm going to create a new file here, app.js. Okay. Now, currently in our dependencies, we only have that one dependency that I haven't even looked at again. I'm not sure why it wasn't working. I haven't looked at it. So we're going to add a new dependency, and that's Express. So how do you add dependencies? So again, just to reiterate, we're going to be using npm, not yarn. But if you see documentation talking about yarn, you can probably find the same thing with npm. Okay, so the way we install dependencies through Node Package Manager is npm space I, and then the package. Now we want to install Express. It just happens to be that the package name is just Express. So npm I Express. Okay, and then just hit enter. And then let it install, and then that's it. Beautiful. If we go to our node modules here, you can actually find it. It's right here. It's just you can actually see the code. If you're curious, if you want to see what the code looks like, by all means, look at it. It's open source. There's the GitHub repo, so you can totally look at it like that as well. Okay, so how do we use Express? Well, it's a module now, right? So all we have to do is say const Express is equal to require, and there it is, Express. See how it auto fills for me? Express. So that's how we know we've installed it. So in this line, we are going to import the Express.js module. Okay, so now we have it. Beautiful. Now, from the Express, we need to create our application. Now, the application is going to be an object where we can register routes based off of HTTP verbs like GET request, POST request, delete, stuff like that. And you're going to see the difference between writing something like this, the old way, versus the new way. So in order to do that, it's pretty common to just call it app. It has nothing to do with the name of the file that I called it. You can call it whatever you want. It's pretty, traditional to just call it app. It's your app. You could call it server if you want. It doesn't really matter. In this case, I'm just going to call it app. Okay, so we're going to set this equal to Express, just like that. So by invoking it, we're going to create an Express application. Okay, so in this line, invoking Express creates an Express application. Okay, so now we have an Express application. Beautiful. So now what do we do? Well, we need to register a bunch of listeners. That's essentially what we're going to do. Now, we register these listeners based off the HTTP verbs. Okay, so we can say something like app dot, and then we have, you can see right here, we have this GET request. So there's a GET request. We also have some deletes. We have a delete. We also have puts. Okay, so go scroll down. We have patch, post, there's put right here, purge, all kinds of stuff, right? These are the HTTP verbs. So the ones that you're most likely going to use is like the get one, for example. Okay, cool. So I do get. This is a function we have to register. Now the first part is the name, right? Basically, what is the path? So you say slash, and you can say something like users, for example. That's a path. So if we look at the old code here, so if we split this, if we look at the old code here, okay, we had a path. One path was users, okay, and then if it was users, we would check the method. But in this case, we check the method first. We register on any GET request that is on the /users path. You see, there is some similarities, right? But how we're handling it now is slightly different. And notice that this is a lot cleaner than having to write a nested switch case, a nested switch statement, right? Here I have a switch and then I have another switch. Here, there is no switches. It's just app.get. This is a GET request, and this is the path that I'm going to listen for. How sweet is that, right? Look, I'm already writing less code. I don't need so many switch statements. Cool. What you then register is something called the request handler. The request handler is just a function that will get invoked with some parameters. The first one, we usually just call it the req, R-E-Q. This is the request. And then you have the response, okay? And that's it. Right? And this is it. So now we have, so in here, we are going to register a GET request on the /users path, URL path. That's it. Now we have a GET request that's going to be listening for the /users. Done. That's it. Look at that. There's no need for so many switch statements. Easy. Okay. We also had the ability to do a post request, right? With the /users. Now, how do you do that? Well, you do app.post /users. Then you have to register a request handler. So you just pass it a arrow function that takes in a request and a response. Done. That's it. Now, this code represents what the switch and this switch was. I've eliminated the use of double switches. Look, this is a lot easier to read. So let's write a comment here. Register a post. So it registers a post. A post request on the /users URL path. Okay. Very, 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 very simple. Okay, cool. So now that we've assigned our request, again, we're going to add more, but in the HTTP way, right, after we create our server, we gave it one function, the handler, and it gave us a request and a response. So you can see there's a similarity in the way this is done. There's a definitely similarity. That's because under the hood, Express is using something very much like HTTP. In fact, I think it's pretty sure it's the same thing, but it's using it under the hood. It's an abstraction. It's abstracted away from you. So that's cool. So once we have the server, right, we've registered our logic in there, we then we need the server to listen to something. Okay, well, our Express application is basically our server logic, so it needs to also listen for incoming requests. So how do we do that? Well, we just say app.listen, okay? And then all you have to do is give it the port number that you want to listen to. So in the old code, we had the we created a variable here for the port. So we'll do that again. Port is equal to, we'll register for 3000. So we'll just pass in the port. And then we have a callback that will get executed if and only if the server is up and running. So we can say console.log. I'll use the string literals. Those are the backticks. And I'll say listening on port. And then I'll inject it. ... Semicolon. Okay, so if we scroll over here on this side, very much the same thing. Okay, that's not a coincidence. Okay, it's not a coincidence. Okay, so logic aside, the prerequisites, right, the boilerplate logic that we had to use the old way by using these switch statements has now been completely eliminated. And now you can see how easily it would be to add new URL paths, right? Look at that. Again, this is an oversimplification of what you can do with Express, but this is like the beginnings, right? Like this is like amazing, okay? And it's incredibly powerful what we can do, okay? Once you become more comfortable using JavaScript, more comfortable with using Node.js, like you can really make some crazy things with this, okay? Cool. So for now, I am going to just, we're going to ignore these, okay? We're going to ignore these. So I'm just going to delete them, okay? We want to see what happens with Express, or let's work with it, okay? So here I just created it. I created a variable called port. I'm telling the app to listen on that specific port. I then pass a callback. Now this arrow function will get called only if the server is able to run on this specific port, okay? Okay, cool. So now all I have to say is node and then run this script file. Hit enter. Now it says listening on port 3000. Okay, cool. So again, we're going to use our one of our developer tools here, Postman. Okay, let's see how Express reacts. Okay, so here we have a GET request. This is an HTTP on localhost :3000. Okay, with no parameters, nothing. I don't think there's anything in here. But we'll just remove this. It doesn't really matter, but let's just like make a very clean one. Now we hit send. Now let's see what happens. Okay, well, it definitely ran. That's the cool thing, it ran. We got this cannot get slash. Now, why are we getting this? And we're getting it as HTML. By default, with Express, any error messages is always going to default to sending back HTML. It is kind of assumed that the Express application you are building is going to be used on some HTML front end. That's kind of the assumption, okay? That's the assumption. That's the default assumption. That's why you're serving HTML files, which begs the question, so can I use HTML instead of like Apache in order to serve my static HTML web files? And the answer is yes. Yes, you can. In fact, if you have an Express application, you can use something like Nginx. I don't know if anybody's ever heard of that, Nginx. It's basically a reverse proxy. So what you can do is you can actually feed a bunch of Express applications that you use in order to serve static HTML files. That's totally possible. In fact, you can even serve your React applications from Express. That's total possibility as well. Basically, the sky's the limit. It doesn't have to be just backend microservice logic. It doesn't have to just be that. It can be a lot more. In fact, you can even use Node.js for Lambda functions for serverless functions to be executed in the cloud. If you guys have ever heard about serverless services, you can use Node.js for that as well, which we might actually talk about because that seems to be kind of like very trendy right now, serverless stuff. Okay, cool. So again, by default, okay, Express is going to serve things as HTML, all the errors. It's going to be like HTML-like. Okay. Now, what's happening here is it says cannot get slash. Now, remember, like I said before, in the paths here, if there is no forward slash, a forward slash is implied. Okay, so Express picked up this implied forward slash and says, I don't know what resource you want. This is very similar to how we handled stuff like this. When we had slash users, if we had like a get or a post, we would always have like these default statements. Users does not support, like let's say like if somebody was trying to delete, we didn't support delete yet. Or if it was like on the resource slash whatever, we would say, I don't know what you're looking for. We would pass in a 400, a bad request if we didn't know. So here they're showing 404 not found. That's probably a better status code. Okay. Okay. Now we're getting that that error code because we haven't registered get slash whatever. So in fact, if we were to change this to slash users, for example, we hit send, we're going to get the exact same error, except now it's going to say slash users, etc., etc., etc. Okay, so how do you avoid getting these errors? Well, you need to register them, right? So if I say app.get, if I have slash, just a forward slash, this means home. This means somebody hit my endpoint without specifying a specific resource, which is totally valid, right? This is totally valid. The thing is, what should the server respond if they just hit the endpoint like this? What should the server respond? Well, that's on a case-by-case basis. It depends on what you're trying to do. What is this web API trying to accomplish? If you can answer that question, then you can answer what should happen if they just say home. This is basically home. Okay? Okay. What we're going to do is if they just, do a request on slash, which is just home, we're going to respond by saying hi. Okay, so here we have the request, we have the response, our arrow function here. Okay, so I'm gonna increase the text so you guys can see. Hopefully you guys can see. Okay, and then how do we respond? Well, with Express, there's a couple of ways we can respond. We can say respond.json, so we can actually send JSON right away. That's totally one way. You could also just, write how we would before. And we also have end. We also have send. Okay. Now, send is used when you're going to terminate. Now, this is probably the preferred way of doing things, saying send, but you can totally just use end if you're going to like not send anything. You could also send something. That's also a possibility. Okay. So there's some slight differences with Express. So let's go through all of them. Okay, so first I want to call on response. Now this response, if we hover over response, what it is, it's this response type of object. This is the type. This is this response. Okay. Now if we hover over the response from the old way of doing things, if we hover over this, it's a type of HTTP server response. Okay. So this object actually inherits from this guy over here, server response. Okay, so if you were to check it, there's a lot of similarities, and again, that's not an accident. Okay, that's not an accident. Okay. All right, so I'm gonna respond by I want to send. And then here, I'm just going to say hello. Okay. I'm going to kill the server. Okay, kill the server. And then run it again. So running node app.js. Now I go over here and I hit send. Boom. Now it just says hello. Okay. Because this is home. Again, if I were to remove this forward slash, the forward slash again is implied. If I hit send again, there it is. Now it just says hello. Beautiful. Not too bad, right? Now, you'll also notice that we're saying hello, but the default content type here is HTML. So if we look at the response here, Okay, if we look at the headers that came in the response, content type is text/HTML. That is the default. That is the default. With the HTML, it was text/plain. But with Express, okay, you can see here that the content type by default is always going to be text/HTML. That's okay. Okay, we should probably specify the content type. However, what's really cool is you can also send back JSON. So we can say JSON, and we can send a JSON body directly in here. For example, I can say message, hello. Hit save. I'm going to kill the server and run it again because I made changes. Now I'm going to go over here. And I'm going to hit send. Now I get a JSON response. Notice how it's formatted. And notice that over here, Postman is able to pick up, oh, you're talking about JSON. Okay, well, how is it able to figure that out? Well, if we look at the headers now, you'll see that the content type is now defaulting to application/JSON. So the beautiful thing about this is that Express has some convenient methods. If you specify JSON, it's going to automatically set all the appropriate headers for you. Okay, so response.send, okay, and then something, go like that. Again, it could be anything. We could say this sends a response with the default content type headers. By default, this is text/HTML. Okay, so I'm gonna comment this out. And then doing it this way, so this sends a JSON response. This will automatically set the content type header for you. Amazing, right? Amazing. Okay, it does a bunch of things for you. That's really cool. So that's one real pro thing that we can do there. It also set the content length, which is 19. So it actually figured out, it did all that stuff for us. That's amazing. That's amazing, right? Now again, if I do something else like, let's say media, again, this / whatever, this one doesn't exist. I hit send. We'll go to the body. Again, I'm getting this HTML stuff because /media doesn't exist. Okay, that doesn't exist. Okay, so every possible route that's going to be valid, we have to make sure we register on those. Okay, or else we're going to get that weird error. Now, we'll talk more about errors on Wednesday, but for now, I just want to talk about this. Does anybody have any questions on this? Okay, like comparing and contrasting these two. I mean, look how little code so far we've needed to write. That's such a beautiful thing. Okay, so I'm going to steal this database logic that I had here, and we're going to just re-implement what we did here on the side, but now we're going to be using Express. Okay, so this is my fake database. So this is my faux database. Okay, we're going to be talking about MongoDB next week. Okay, so this is my faux database. Okay. So here we're just going to say hello. Now let's do the /user. So app.get /users. Okay, there's our request, there's our response. Okay, so we're going to add a little comment here. This route will return all of the resources that are users. Okay, because again, when we talk about, RESTful APIs, all you're ever doing is just returning the state of resources. That's all you're doing. It's just you're playing around with resources. That's it. It's not that special, right? But the basic guidelines is very simple, but it's very powerful when used properly. So again, in this case, we're just going to be returning a bunch of users. That's it. Okay. And so we know how to do this, right? We know how to do this. So all we have to do is say const users is equal to, go to our database, which is just an array, and we can filter, right? So we use a filter. Now the filter requires a predicate. So a predicate is something that's going to return true or false. That's all a predicate really is. So in this case, the filter is going to apply the following predicate to every single element in my array. Okay, it just so happens that my array is made of a bunch of JavaScript objects. Again, the filter doesn't care what the element types are. It's going to get called on every single element. So in this case, we just have, what did I call them? Person. So we'll say we're going to filter the database to each person. Call it that. So if the person dot type, using a triple equal sign, is a type of user, okay, if this is true, then we want to keep it. If it's false, it gets filtered out, right? So we don't actually keep it. So it's not going to be in my array of people here. Again, that's what this database is, right? It's an array of JavaScript objects, which I'm just calling people, okay? So each one's a person. But as a collective, in this context, they're users because I want all the people that are of type user. Okay, cool. So now that I have that, I can return this now. So how do I return? Well, I make a response. Response dot, and I can use JSON. Beautiful. Okay, so I'm going to pass a JavaScript object, again, using my curly braces. Okay, I can do it all in one go. Okay, so I want this to look exactly how I did it the old way. So how did I do that? I just returned the array. Okay, beautiful. So I can do that. So I'll just return the users like this. Okay, nothing fancy, just like that. Hit save, kill the server, run the server again. And now if I do /users and I hit send, there we go. I get my array of the people that are of type user. Okay, and that's it. That's it. Very simple. Okay. Now again, let's look at this data. The data had users, it had types were user, and also types that were admin. For example, this resource here, Elon Musk, was an admin. We had Bob Dylan was also an admin. Okay, but the filter filtered out all of the resources, all of the people that were not of type user. Beautiful. Now, one of the other paths that we had was we wanted to get all the admins. So let's do that as well. Let's get all the admins. So we have a request, response object. Again, this is an arrow function. Okay, so this route's going to get us all of the admins. So let's filter all the admins out. So const admins is equal to database dot filter. Each one is a person. Again, you can call it whatever, right? I could call this Apple. I'm gonna call it Apple because it doesn't matter. Apple dot type triple equals, if this is a type of admin, okay, then I'm gonna get then if it's true, remember it's a predicate, so if it's true, we keep the resource. If it's false, it gets filtered out, so it doesn't end up in our array here. And then we just say response.json, and we're going to pass in the admins, right? Whatever was filtered through. You're going to hit save, kill the server, run the server again. Check our postman. So we're going to switch /users to /admins. Hit send. Now we have our admins. We filter them out. Beautiful. Okay. Now we have half of the previous requirements here, right? We have half of it, okay, basically. And so far we're at 71 lines of code, and the logic is pretty sound. Majority of them actually this time is comments like this comment right here, right? Now look at this. We were at 166 and we're almost done. We're almost done, like with all the requirements that were there before. And as a bonus, this is more extensible. It's maintainable, it's scalable, right? This is amazing, right? So look at what this framework offers us, right? Maintainability, scalability, you know, and, you know, extensibility. So lots of abilities. We have the ability to do a whole lot of things now versus the old way. You could still do it, but you're going to be fighting with your own code. Just the way it's formatted, you're going to be fighting against it too much. That's not a good thing. All right. The other thing that would have been very complicated to do from this right side is, what if we wanted to get a particular user? See, that's tricky. Okay, that's a problem that you have to solve. If you're a backend developer, getting resources, you know, this is easy. Getting all the resources, that's easy, right? Anybody could do that. Now we have to solve the problem of, okay, now we need to get a resource by a particular ID or something like that. There's some constraints here, okay? So if we wanted to get a user based off their ID, how do we do that, right? How do we do that? Now in REST, the way you should do that is something like this. I want to get, basically the way it reads, from admins, the admin with this ID. Let's just say that's the ID, right? This is how it should look like, because remember, in REST, the URL, the entire URL, is supposed to point to a very specific resource. So under the admins, I want this very specific admin, right? In this case, it's going to be done by ID. So, for example, if you were to go to like, you know, like YouTube, right? I'm gonna find a random video. Here, this is a Tailwind video. Okay. Okay. Let's inspect the URL. So this URL is HTTPS, so that's the protocol. So this first part is the protocol. This www is what's called the subdomain. So that www is the subdomain. This is the domain, YouTube, right? That's the domain name. This is called the top level domain, TLD. So this is the domain. It's called YouTube. This is the subdomain, which is www. And this is the top level domain, the com for commerce. And then everything past that is just a URL. Okay. This entire thing is called a URI, a universal resource identifier. Okay. Basically, no matter where this is in the world, in the universe, this should always point to the exact same resource. At least that's the idea. So, how does YouTube do this? Well, YouTube's been around for quite a long time. They were around before, you know, inception of REST. So, how do they handle this? Well, they have a specific path called /watch. Okay, they have /watch. Okay. Now, from this watch resource, they're adding a query parameter. You can see that there's a question mark, and V, again, they're using very small variable names in the URLs because you don't want to take up that much space. If you're going to have thousands, if not millions of videos, every character takes up 1 byte, you can save quite a bit of memory if you just have the variables be very small. Okay, so this V is only 1 character. V is for video. So we can assume that this is the video identifier. This is the identifier for the resource. Okay, they could have easily, I'm pretty sure if they could do this again, they would probably do something like this. They would probably, maybe to keep the watch, but they'll do something like this, watch slash. This is now RESTful, because like, okay, under the watch, okay, well, it probably wouldn't be under that. It'd be under videos. This would make, now this makes more sense. Under all the videos, get me the video with this ID. That's basically what this sentence, or quote unquote sentence, is basically saying. Okay, that's what it's saying. So this is basically saying, under all these resources, get me this particular resource. From all of these resources, get me this resource. Okay, and then you can chain it. That's the beautiful thing about REST, is you can actually chain this. Okay, so hopefully that makes sense. Again, these are nouns. Okay, these are person, places, or things. That's what resources are. Person, places, or things. They're nouns. They are not verbs. They are not adjectives. We provide the adjectives. We provide the verbs. The client provides those things. How do we want to get the resource? Do we want to get it? Do you want to delete it? Do you want to update it? Those are the verbs. The adjectives, we can also pass in the query parameters to give us, okay, describe how you want to get this resource, right? Oh, I want it to be sorted, right? That's description. Oh, this thing is sorted. Or I wanted to limit the amount of resources I get back. I only want to get 10 at a time instead of 1,000, right? This ID here acts as a particular resource. We're identifying a particular resource under this. Okay, now again, YouTube doesn't do that, right? YouTube doesn't do that, but they kind of almost do that. Okay. Again, YouTube was around before the idea of REST was around. But if you were to look at things like Instagram, for example, I don't have an Instagram, so I can't really show you. But I want you, if you do have an Instagram, go on Instagram, go on their website, and then pay attention to the URL. Pay attention to the URL. Go to your profile. Okay, as an Instagram user, go to your profile. And then look at the top. Okay, and then I want you to just look at the top. And then does it look something like this? Or does it look something that's kind of RESTful? Where maybe it looks something like users slash, and then, whatever, right? Or if you have like a, look, if you had a username, it would be like your username would be here. Okay? If it looks something like that, then you know they're trying to use some kind of RESTful web API. That's what they're trying to build. Okay, so I would, as a homework, I would tell you, if you have some kind of social media, especially something that's relatively modern, to try it out. Okay. Okay. So what we want to do is we want to have something like this, where we have all the resources, but we want to get a particular one by ID, for example. So how do we solve that using Express? So Alex says it immediately goes to user. Yes, so that's a possibility. So the way that that's actually being handled, if that's the case, okay, if that's the case, is that underneath the hood, they're using cookies and tokens to identify who you are. Okay, that's for you. What I want you to do is click on another person, like one of your friends or somebody that you follow, and then look at the URL. Okay, so for some people, like if you use Twitter or something like that, or any of these social medias, they want it to seem like, quote unquote, like friendly. So the URLs are going to be nicer if it's in perspective of view. So if it's your profile, it might just say twitter.com/ whatever your username is. But if you're looking at somebody else's, that might change the URL. That might be more RESTful. Okay, so that's probably something that they're doing. Now, if you were to look at their APIs, how you actually get a particular user, it's going based off the REST standard. Okay, so try it out. Click on somebody that you follow, see what their profile looks like. Their URL is going to look probably much different than yours. Okay. So how do we get a particular admin or a particular user, right? This logic's going to work for both. So how do we do that? Okay, so let's start with the users. So we say app.get/users, okay? But now we're going to do something really interesting. This is what I love about Express. This is something that you cannot do with the old way using HTTP server. I mean, you could, but you have to parse a lot of stuff, and it's just a pain in the butt. Here, what we can do is we can do what's called URL parameters. So the way you do that is Express is really smart. If you feed it a colon, so you have this a special character. So you do /:, feed it the name of the parameter that you would like to use. So for example, ID. Okay, that's it. That's all you got to do. Express will handle the rest. So now all we do is pass it a handler. So request response. Okay. Now all we're going to do is I'm going to respond back by hitting respond send, and I want to respond with the ID that they were looking for. So I'm going to use a backtick. So the literal, I'm going to use a string literal here. And I'm just going to say you are looking for the user with ID, and I'm going to inject the ID. Now, how do I get the ID? Well, that's part of the request, right? You did the request. So Express has this very special property. So under the request dot params, under params, if we do a dot, you're going to see the ID. Again, it's interesting because here it's actually filling it out. I could have called this banana. Okay, this is not a pre-assigned thing. Now if I hit the dot, now it says banana. Okay, or B-A-N-N-A. Okay, I don't know how to spell banana. I think that's how you spell it, banana. There you go, banana. Banana. Are you guys not seeing this? Like, this is freaking awesome. Like, how the hell would you have done this? This is the part that freaks me out. Like, how the hell did they manage to do this? That's freaking cool. Okay, you can call this, you know, peanut butter, something like that. Okay, dot, and there it is, peanut butter. Is this not like freaky? Like, it's just freaking cool. Okay, this excites me, all right, because this makes my life easier. Okay, now it's able to dynamically figure out what the heck you put in that string, and then it's able to add it as a comment, a commentable property. So now we have it here. It exists. If that doesn't impress you, then I don't know. I don't know what'll impress you. But I'm telling you, as a developer, that is freaking amazing. You could do that, and it's all completely dynamic. I don't have to compile anything. It just does it. That's freaking insane. Okay. You may not appreciate it right now because, you know, you're still learning this stuff, but later on you'll be like, you know, oh my gosh, that's insane. Okay, so now that we have that, so again, this property is dynamically being created from this. That's the part that's insane. That's like voodoo magic. So I'm going to kill the server, run this again. Okay. Again, I have, okay, so we did it under users. So under users, we're going to do a get. Under the users, I would like to get the user with this particular ID. Now, if I hit send, if it works, I should get this in the response inside of a sentence. So I hit send. You are looking for the user with ID, and there's this ID. These match. They match. That's awesome. That is freaking awesome. Now, let's use that to actually find the user that they were looking for. Okay, now again, if we look at our fake database here, each JavaScript object has a property called ID. So we could just do a simple search. So let's find the particular user. So we can say const user is equal to database.find. Okay, this find is also a predicate. So it's going to return the very first object it finds, the very first element in this array that it finds that satisfies the predicate. So I'm going to call it person. So if person.id is equal to request.params, oops, request, remember this is coming from the request, so under the request params dot id, there it is, freaky. Okay, now find is interesting because it'll return the element that satisfies this predicate. However, if it doesn't find it, this will be undefined. This will be undefined. Okay, so let's go ahead and do a response.send, or yeah, JSON. We'll do a JSON, and we're going to pass in the user and see what happens. Okay, this is terrible because we're not doing what? We are not null checking. We're not null checking. We're just going to assume that you put the ID in there correctly, which you should never assume. But for now, let's see what happens. Let's see what happens. Okay, so I killed it. We're running it again. I haven't changed anything. I'm going to hit send. We get nothing back. Okay, we return undefined, which is just, well, nothing. Okay, so you got nothing back. Okay. However, what happens if we feed it with a valid user ID, like this one, right? So ID, this one right here. So we should get John Cena because John Cena is a user, right? So we're going to hit paste there, hit send. Okay, we still get a 200. Interesting. Did it not do that? Or what's going on here? Huh. Interesting. For some reason it's not pulling up. So let me log this real quick. Maybe I didn't save it. Hit send. Huh, still says undefined. This ID. Oh, my mistake. There's something I forgot, which is when you're using a triple equal sign. So by default, Express has no idea what this type is, the ID. So it defaults to a type of string. Okay. Because I'm using a triple equal sign, it's going to check the type and then the value. So it doesn't coerce. My person, the ID is a type of number. This is a type of string. Numbers and strings, not the same. It's always going to return false. So for now, I'm going to use a double equal sign just so I can show you the demo of it working. But we're going to fix that. Okay, we got to fix it. Hit send. Now we get John Cena. There we go. Now we get John Cena. But here's the problem. So John Cena is a type of user. However, what if we accidentally fed it under the users? We fed it a admin ID. We hit send. We will get the admin as well. So we need to put some checks here, right? This is bad. This is bad design. So let's fix that. So first of all, we need to make sure that the person.type is a type of user and that the person ID is exactly the same. Now, here's the problem. by default, Express is going to make these dynamic parameters that are coming from here, they're going to default to strings. Yeah, even Express can't see John Cena, exactly. So they're going to default to type string. So what needs to happen is we need to parse it out. So we can say number.parse int. Can we pass in that string? Okay. Now we should be safe enough to use a triple equal sign. So we're going to run this again. Okay, so if we hit send now, we should get nothing back because this is an ID associated with an admin, which was Elon Musk in this case. So let's get John Cena back in here. Gonna hit paste in there, hit send, and we get John Cena because John Cena is a type of user. Okay, now if I messed up the ID, we just get nothing, but we always get a 200. That's terrible. That's terrible design. So we need to alert, we need to send back a situation where that user does not exist. So how do we do that? Well, we can say something like the following. If user, so if the user exists, right? So we can put it like this. Now, the way this works is that if this is undefined, you're going to get a 0, which is basically if you coerce undefined or null in JavaScript, it always becomes a 0, which is false, and that gets coerced to a false. Anything else other than undefined or null, you will always get some value like 1 or just something. It gets coerced to something other than 0, which becomes coerced to a true. So if the user basically is not undefined, so this is shorthand notation for saying if user does not equal undefined and user does not equal null. Okay. Instead of writing all of this, what I can do is, because I understand JavaScript, instead of doing this to see if the user actually exists, I can just do this. This is a shorthand notation. Okay. So if the user exists, I want to return. I just want to respond with the user as JSON. Okay, cool. However, else, if the user is undefined, if we couldn't find it, then we should respond accordingly. For example, we should respond with a 404, right? A 404 would let the client know, whoever's consuming our API, that what? The resource doesn't exist. Okay, so let's do that. So first we want to change the status code. Okay, we want to change the status code. So the way we can do that is here, response.status code, we're going to do a 404. We weren't able to find it. Okay, so there you go. We changed the status code. Now we can do a respond.json. We're going to respond with a JSON. And then inside here, we'll do a message property with, I'm going to use string literals so I can inject. So I'm going to say, could not find user with ID, and then using the injection, the $sign with curly braces, I'm going to put request.params.id. Done. So if the user exists, we will respond with that user. Else, we are going to set the status code to 404, which is not found, and then we're going to respond nicely with a JSON object and a message here saying could not find user with ID. Hit save, kill this, run it again. Let's go back here, hit send. We get could not find user with ID, whatever. If I change it back, we get John Cena. Now, again, if I provide, for example, the ID of an admin, again, under users, we're not looking for admins. We're looking for only those that are users. If I hit send, which technically the ID does exist, however, this resource is an admin. So if I hit send, could not find user with ID, blah, blah, blah. Right? Is this making sense? Are you guys following? Right? Does anybody have any questions up to here? Are you guys good? Okay, I'm going to take your silence as you guys are understanding. Okay, cool. So with all of those, so with that new features that we added, the ability to now find a user by a particular ID, we still have less code written than the previous way. That's insane. We've added new functionality, like getting a user by its particular ID, and we still have less code written had we done it the old way. This is 166. We are like less than half. And we have more features. And it's going to be a lot easier to extend this, right? For example, let's say with admins, you wanted to do the same thing. You wanted to get an admin based off a particular ID. Okay, so we say get admins /:ID. So when we get an admin by a particular ID, so again, we use the colon operator. This is a special symbol that's going to add this to our query parameter. Beautiful. And then we need a handler. So request, response. We're going to feed it an arrow function like so. Now we're going to find a particular admin. So const admin is equal to database.find. Call it person, doesn't matter. So we got to make sure that the person is a type of admin and that the person.id triple equals. Now again, Express is going to default these dynamic route values as a string, so we need to parse it. So number.parseInt request.params.id, and there it is. This must match this. They have to match. They have to match. Okay. So if the admin object exists, again, I'm going to do this the long way so you can see what I'm talking about. So if admin does not equal undefined, and admin does not equal null. Look how much code I had to write, where I could have saved so much by doing it this way. Again, these two are the same. So if it's not the case that admin is not defined and it's not null, then I will respond with the admin. Beautiful. Else, okay, I'm going to change the status code. So I'm going to say response.status 404 not found. Now instead of breaking it up into 2 lines like this, I'm going to do something called chaining. So the way I like to do chaining is I put every dot on a separate line like that, and I do dot. So what's really cool about this is I can actually chain certain types like this. So status, actually, if you look at the return type of status is itself the response object. So this gives me the ability to do something like this. So response.status 404.json, and I can do something like this. Look at that. I had to write res, the response dot, one less time. This could actually save you quite a bit of time by doing chaining. Now, response is something that can do that. If you want to be able to do something like this is something sometimes called the builder pattern. Although here we're not, I guess we technically are building something, but this is a very nice way in order to chain operations. So every time you're going to operate on something, chaining is really, really a cool way of doing that. All right, so here we're just going to say message. We're going to say could not find admin with ID request.params.id. Colon at the end. Look at that. So these two here basically do the same thing, except one's looking for a user, right? User. The other one's looking for an admin. Beautiful. I'm going to kill the server, run it again, pull out my postman. All right, let's try it. So under users, this ID won't work, right? Because they're an admin. I've hit send. Could not find user with ID that. Okay. However, if I use it under admins, hit send, I do get that resource back because they are a type of admin and the ID is valid. So if I were to change this by adding a 1 there, I could not find admin with ID, whatever. Okay. Again, super simple examples that I'm showing you here. Okay. However, if you think about it, right? Think about it throughout the day. Think about it, right? For the rest of today, just stop and think. Okay, knowing what I know now about Express and just this small stuff that you understand here, stuff that I showed you, what is it that you could build with this? That's how you need to start thinking. As a software engineer, right? We're engineers, but we also have to think like builders. Like be creative. Like, how can I use this new tools and build something, right? You got to get your hands dirty. You got to actually build something, code something. This is pretty remarkable abilities that Express is giving you. Like, seriously, this is freaking insane. Like, I dare you. Like, I freaking dare you to try and do this using Java servlets and the Swing library. Like, go do it. Like, I dare you. Or heck, go even try and use MVC framework and entities in C# or, you know, whatever you want to use under .NET. I freaking dare you to go do it and tell me if that is easier to do than this. Just look up the documentation, how you get started with that stuff. And then look at the documentation for Express. Now, again, each framework has its pros and cons. Each framework has its pros and cons. If you have an entire system that is Microsoft products, like as a business, whatever company you end up working for, if it's all related to Microsoft products, then you should probably use MVC entities, right? You should probably just stick with that. But if it's not, if it's using something else like Mongo or like MySQL, it has nothing to do with Microsoft products, even if it's on Azure, but I'm saying it has nothing to do with Microsoft, Node.js is a totally valid alternative, okay? I think PayPal, I think this is like a really interesting talk here, is PayPal was using Java as its backend, using Java servlets and stuff. That's where they were using their entire server. All the processing information was done through Java. They then switched to Express. They ended up writing like, I think it was like 30% less code. They used like Node.js and Express. They wrote less code. They completely rebuilt the entire thing with the exact same features. They wrote less code and it was faster. So there's another jab at Java, right? I love jabs to Java. Okay, I don't like it. It's slow, okay? And PayPal was able to increase the amount of requests it was able to do to clients. I think the margin was something like 15 or 20%, which if at scale, that's millions. That's tens of millions, if not hundreds of millions of requests. That's money. That's money. That's insane. So less code, they were able to do it faster, right? So it's faster now. And they're saving money by making money, right? Time is money. So the more requests you can get out there to fulfill, the more money you're making. So overall, it was just a great deal, right? Overall, it's just a great deal for PayPal. I encourage you to look up that dev blog post that they wrote about switching from Java to a Java backend to a Node backend, and it's just freaking remarkable, right? And that's just one case of this. There's many cases riddled with people just using Express rather than going through using Java Servlet. Again, back in the day, that's probably what you would use, but this is not. This is 2021. If you're literally thinking about starting a Java backend, I don't know why you would want to do that. Unless you're working for a company that's already using Java backend, I just don't see I don't see a good reason to use it. You talk about cross-platform. Node.js is cross-platform, works on Linux, all different kinds of flavors of Linux. It's also compatible with Mac and Windows. It's also like it's a first-class citizen with Docker, so you can use Docker and like deploy your Docker containers very easy with Node.js. So yeah, I don't know. The less people write Java code, the happier I'll be. But that's just me. All right. So cool. So we have new features now. Okay. We have users, getting all kinds of users by ID, getting all the admins, getting admins by ID, and we're now not even barely breaking 100 lines of code, and we have more features now, and it's still less code than this garbage that we wrote in the beginning. That's freaking remarkable, right? Okay, so one of the things that we could do before was we had this post, so we could actually create users. And then we had this situation where we had to wait for the request to give us the data and blah, 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 blah. And then we had to parse the data into JSON and et cetera, et cetera. Okay. Now let's see how we can do the exact same thing using Express. Okay. Okay. So with Express, it's pretty simple. You want to do a post request? No problem. App.post. Register on the post, your route. You want to post to the user's route. Okay, no problem. Give it a handler, request, response, and Express will take care of it. Okay, cool. For demoing purposes, let's just, well, let me tell you. In the request, if you put anything into the body of Postman here, right? So again, it has nothing to do with Postman, but just the HTTP body. If you put anything in here, whether it's a file, a video, or just like, JSON, this is called the body, the HTTP body, okay? If you put anything in there, Express will grab that. So it's under Express and we have this body property. Beautiful. So all I want to do now is I'm going to say console.log request.body, okay? And I'm going to say respond.end. Just want to end the response, okay? I don't want to do anything right now. So I'm going to kill the server and run it again. Cool. So if I go to /users and I switch to a post request and I hit send, nothing should happen. Nothing should happen. However, if we look over here on the server code, we should be logging what the body has. Currently, right now, it's undefined. Okay, it's undefined. Now, let me switch this to text to make a point here. If I were to just, put some random text in here and I hit send, okay, we are still getting undefined. Interesting. Okay, I might need to enable the body parser. That's okay, so that's probably what's going on. I need to enable the body parser. Okay. Man, I didn't want to have to talk about that today. Okay, well, we still have some time. Okay. So with Express, we have the ability of something called middleware. Okay, we have something called middleware. Okay. Yeah, I didn't want to talk about this right now, but my hand's kind of getting forced. Okay. So middleware is basically what the name entails. It's just like software or code that just runs between two things, right? In this case, we're getting a response, we're getting a request from the client. Now, what we want to do is have some code that actually works between the request, Express, okay, from the request that Express got and our actual handler here, okay? So one way to do that is here, activating it globally. So the way we use middleware is we say app.use, okay? So this is going to activate middleware, okay? So the middleware that we can activate, which is part of Express, is we can say express.json. Okay, this is all you have to do. It's not nothing else. You just pass it in like this. So okay, and then here we have some options that you can use. Okay, but for now we're just going to do it like that. So express.json, and you invoke it, and what it's going to oops, sorry about that. What it's going to return is this handler function. Okay, this is basically the middleware. Okay, so here we're going to do is something called activate JSON Express middleware. I'm going to show you how you can build your own middleware, okay? But for now, let's just hand wave here. This is middleware. So now if I hit save and I kill this server and I run it again, one of the issues now is that if I try to send text, it should in this case, we're going to get an empty JSON object. Okay, so it's no longer undefined, but it's like this JSON object. Now, the reason why that happened was that we have text here. However, it's not valid JSON. So when I tried to parse it, it got undefined, but instead of sending you undefined, it's always going to give you these curly braces. However, if we switch it to JSON, okay, we hit send, now we're getting something different. This is the error I was kind of expecting. The header type that we sent in the body was text. We had sent it text in the beginning. When we did this, the middleware is smart enough to check the request headers. If the content type was not, see what here, the content type here is text/plain. If it's not JSON, it's not going to try it. Now, the reason why it's not going to try it is just like what you saw here. It will cause a crash. In this case, it's going to do what's called a silent error. So it's not going to cause your application to crash, but you will see this. This is an error, okay? It didn't crash. So it's fine here, right? There's no crashes as long as the content type, the headers, does not match application/JSON. If I switch this is obviously invalid JSON. But if you look at the header is now under application/JSON. So when it tries to do the parsing, it will cause an error. So if I hit send again here, you see there's an error. So I must send valid JSON. So that could be like an empty object. There's the empty object. Or you could fill something in like fname for first name. There's my first name. Hit send, and boom, there it is. Boom, we got it. I can also, I can do whatever here. I can send anything here. If I send empty, we get empty. Okay, cool. And that's it. Now, this middleware is doing a lot for us. It's not just, parsing out the JSON data. It's doing a lot for us, actually. And that's kind of like the point of having middlewares. Middlewares are basically like little functions that you can add to basically clean up the request objects or anything like that, and then hand it off to you so you can do the final final consumption of it. So let's start with the images again. So here's the client. So let's do a little do like a little laptop. Okay. There's all the keys, whatever. And then, okay, so this is the client. Okay, so the client, and then this is the internet. Okay, this is the internet. Is there a symbol for the internet? I don't know. We'll do like these little wavy thingies. That's Wi-Fi, but whatever. This is the internet. So you do a request. The request goes out to the internet. Let's say we do a GET request. Okay? Yeah, you do a GET request. Okay? To /users, for example. Okay. Now in the body, okay, let's say you send some valid JSON or whatever. Okay, cool. You send that. You send it and it hits our server here. So there's our little server. Beep, boop, beep, right? This is our server. This is our server. Okay. Here's our server. Okay, cool. And then our server, so we get it, and we're listening on port 3000 right now. That's the port we're listening on. Okay. And then it goes into our app that's currently running. Okay. Our app is running Express. Express got the request. So the request and the response objects have been created. Now it's going to push it through any of those gets and posts and whatever. Okay. And then this is us. So this is us. App dot get slash blah 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 blah, right? So the issue here is that this request and response maybe needs some cleanup, or maybe you want to write a logger so that every request that ever comes in, you're logging it to some file. We're going to talk about Morgan later, which is a framework that we can use to do that. So sometimes you want to, before you actually consume it, you want to do something. This is where middleware comes into play. Middleware will take the request and the response in your Express application, do something with it, and then feed it to you. So whatever app.get slash blah, 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 right? So Express has this amazing concept of middleware. So we can actually write our own, right? We can actually write our own. For example, under here, this use, I'm going to say app.use. Okay. We have this request. Actually, we're going to leave the middlewares for Wednesday because I think we're kind of running out of time. Yeah, we're kind of running out of time. We'll talk more about the middleware on Wednesday. I didn't want to talk about it today because I want to dedicate a whole day to middleware. That way you guys can do some fancy stuff with it. But yeah, I'm going to leave that for Wednesday. I had to do it in order for this to work. So the ability to say request.body and for it to be JSON is the JSON middleware enables request.body to be a JS object. It's going to parse it out for us. We'll talk more about middlewares on Wednesday. That's why I didn't want to talk about it today. It's kind of throwing too much at you, so I don't want to really talk about middleware. But middleware is a very important thing. The global symbol works for the internet. The @ sign, okay. When I think of @ I think of mail. That's why I don't like it. But yeah. Okay, so we'll talk about middlewares next time. Does anybody have any questions on anything that I've gone through? Okay, because if you're looking for a job as a backend developer in today's day, understanding Node.js is kind of crucial, right? It's pretty crucial. So I'll give you some, anecdotal stuff. So I've been interviewing with various companies, okay? And all these big companies I've interviewed for where there was a backend position, like 80% of them was Node.js based. So I'm just throwing that figure out there. So in the case like, you're like a junior or you're like a senior in university or something like that, and you're thinking, oh, I want to be a backend developer, that's like interests me. You need to know Node.js, at least some of it, right? I'm not saying be a pro. If you could be a pro, hey, that's great. It's better, good on you. But you need to understand how it works. The more you work on Node.js for your backend skills, the more you're going to learn about how backend systems are actually built, how they work, and how they're deployed, and how you can actually see them in the wild. Okay. Now, I'm not saying like if you want to go work at Microsoft, you're going to be working on Node.js. You actually could, but I'm saying like, companies like Microsoft are probably going to stick to their Azure stack. So use Azure, maybe, ASP.NET with MVC and their entity stuff. You'll probably end up working with that. But Microsoft also has other stuff that's probably running with Node, like their serverless stuff, that either Golang or Node, one of those two. Again, you know, there are some other companies that were exclusively using Node, or they were migrating from something like Java to Node, which is why they were hiring for these positions. So again, that's very anecdotal, but I'm telling you, that's kind of like the realities of stuff. Right? Why would these big companies be spending millions of dollars from rewriting their entire architecture that's already there and working like Java, switching over to Node? Like, you have to think about that. Why are they doing it? There's a good reason. And if somebody's willing to invest, hundreds of millions of dollars into these projects to go from Java backend to Node.js, that's something you should think about. It's not something you should, just sleep on. Okay. So hopefully that gives you something to think about. Okay. I encourage you, if you're interested in backend development, look up the positions of the jobs that you would like to work at, and then look at the requirements. You're going to be astonished that all the requirements that are on that is everything that I've been talking about throughout this entire month and some change. Like, it's freaky. That's because this is kind of like where the industry is going, at least for now, right? Once Dino comes around and Rust becomes, more digestible for people, that's where the world's going to go. It's going to be Rust, but we'll see. For now, it's Node.js. So yeah, I definitely encourage you to look, go on LinkedIn, look for all these jobs that are like backend, whatever that you're looking for, and then just look at the requirements. It's going to be like astonishing, right? Everything I've been talking about here is exactly what they're looking for. I didn't want to waste your time talking about Java and whatever. I'm trying to show you the things that are being asked in today's industry. So, please, look into it, and then practice the stuff that I'm showing you. Practice, 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 practice makes better. Practice does not make perfect, but practice makes better. And eventually, with enough time, maybe you can reach some idea of perfection in this, right? Some kind of level of mastery. But you're only going to get that through experience, okay? All the error messages that you'll ever come across, you're only going to ever see those and understand how to, fix them is by experience. I could sit here and talk all day of all the possible errors that you're going to encounter, but none of it's ever going to come close to you experiencing those errors yourself and then trying to solve them. Okay? That's just experience. You cannot get experience without actually doing something. So if you're interested in backend development, people are hiring like crazy. Okay? The pandemic, everything went online. Okay? Everything went online. So one of the benefits, I suppose, for people like us is that because everything's going online, like drastically being shifted because of the pandemic, there's plenty of jobs for backend developers to build a lot of these systems in order to enable a lot of businesses to be able to do their business, not just, in person, but, online. So I'm telling you, you know, practice, 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 practice. Try and do everything that I just did today. Try and do it on your own. Okay? I didn't see anybody, not a single peep, nobody, except for Jim. He had an issue. I think he resolved it. Nobody really talked about in the assignment that I had assigned last week, or yeah, was it? Yeah, on Friday. Nobody talked about it entire weekend. So my reaction to that is either you did it 100% and you had no issue, or you didn't even attempt it. If you didn't attempt it, I'm just going to tell you right now, if you didn't attempt it and try and solve that assessment, I don't know what you're doing. Like, I really don't. Like, I'm not trying to be mean, but I really don't know what you're doing. Like, academic stuff is going to help you, yes. But if you want to get a job, you want to build something, heck, if you don't even want to work for somebody, you just want to build something yourself, start your own business, which you totally could, then you need to start practicing, right? You can watch videos all the way through. Doesn't matter. You can buy all the Udemy courses online, that are free, or purchase all of them. None of it's going to mean jack shit if you don't practice. I'm telling you. LeBron James, Kobe Bryant, Michael Jordan, they didn't get better by watching people play basketball. They got better by playing basketball every day. That's the only way you get better. That's practice. Okay? Practice makes better. So please, 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 as programmers, as future software engineers, that's the path that you guys want to go. Please, please, please practice every day. At least dedicate an hour or two, to just work on stuff. I know some of you guys are in school and stuff like that, and I understand. I totally understand. But I'm not trying to tell you like, hey, stay up late at night. But I'll tell you my experience with this kind of stuff. I have gone days without having a proper sleep schedule, where like I'll start working on something like at 9 and then it's 6 a.m. the next day and I have no idea where the time went. I was so focused and working on the stuff that I was working on that I just didn't know where time went, and then I had to go to school. So that's been my experience, because this is my future, and so I put all of my time into it, and I try and get better all the time. This is something to me that's very, very, very important. And I assume that if you're here, it's important to you too. So I'm just trying to tell you that if you want to get better at this stuff, you have to practice. So I really hope you guys are practicing the things that I'm showing you. Maybe I'm just such a good teacher that none of you guys have any questions because I explained it so well the first time. Hey, maybe that's it. I don't think so, but hey, maybe it is. I don't know. But I hope you guys are practicing. Please don't be afraid to ask questions. Okay? Don't be afraid to ask questions. Ask questions. In fact, during your interviews and you're doing the whiteboard questions, if you're up there and you're not saying anything, that's not a good sign, right? They want people that are not afraid to ask questions, that are willing to interact, work on a team. So here we're all a team. We're all learning together, right? So ask questions, okay? I'm telling you, the first time you ever do an interview and they have you do a whiteboard question, you're going to freak out. It's going to happen. But the cool thing is, like, they're expecting you to ask questions. So practice now asking questions. Don't be afraid that you could possibly be wrong. That's part of the learning process. Who cares if you're wrong, right? I don't know everything. A lot of times I'm working here. A lot of the stuff I'm doing live. Like I don't prepare some of the stuff, which is probably a bad thing. But I'm doing this live because I want to show you my thinking process. Okay, I found an error. How do I work through it? I don't want to just make everything fake. All the errors that you see is happening live, and I'm trying to figure out how to solve these problems. Because I don't memorize anything. I just try and solve the problems as I go. I want you guys to see me struggle, so you guys can see what it's like. And then when you see yourself struggling, you'll be like, oh well, you know what? I've seen Kevin do it before, and so he kind of did it this way. So let me try and tackle it this way too, and whatever. I want you guys to see somebody struggling, Because if you go on YouTube, whatever, you'll find, you know, they'll be coding, everything's always perfect the first time. It's just like, that's not reality. Reality is you're going to be looking at your screen for 3-4 hours trying to solve a stupid mistake that you can't figure out. You're like, why did this guy code a video and it's only 10 minutes long and so perfect? It's like, because it didn't take him 10 minutes, it took him hours because he probably had errors, right? Here I'll try to do it the opposite. I want to show you the errors. Things are going to break. That's kind of the point. But I want you guys to see how I go about solving those problems. In the allowed time, I'll have like an hour and a half. So, anyways, small rant there. But you know, again, I'm trying to like help you be successful in your guys' futures. And all I can say is practice, 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 practice. Please practice. Do yourself a favor. Again, it makes no difference to me what happens to your future. It really doesn't. And I'm not trying to be mean, but it really doesn't affect me. But I like helping people. And if you're here, it means you want to learn and you think I could probably help you. So I am helping you. I'm telling you the reality. You have to practice. Okay? You have to practice. Again, I'm gonna eat. I'm gonna go to sleep, and your future does not affect me like in the slightest. So I'm not telling you any of this to benefit me. I'm telling you this to benefit yourself. Okay, so that's my advice. Practice, practice, practice. If you have questions, the Discord server is 100% free. This whole stuff is free. I'm not getting paid for any of this, right? I'm not getting paid for any of this. And if you want to give me your money, I don't want your money. This is all completely 100% free. I'm trying to do something that I think is valuable. You know, I wish somebody could have done this for me when I was learning all this stuff. But here I am. So yeah, please take advantage. Ask questions. People, like John and Jim, they'll ask questions, or some of them will DM me. We need to have more of that. More of that needs to happen. Please. Either I'm teaching you 100% correctly and you totally understand this, or you're not practicing. And if you don't practice, it doesn't matter if you watch every single video throughout the entire summer. You're not going to be prepared. Okay, so please, I want you guys to be successful. I want all of you guys to have six-figure salaries. I want you guys to have to take care of your family, take care of yourself, or whatever. So again, this is your future. To me, it does not affect me, but I want to see you guys succeed. So please practice, okay? Anyways, with that, I will see you guys on Wednesday, and we'll talk about middlewares and some other advanced Express concepts. All right? See you, everyone.